And welcome. Richard, Dick, and Barbara are back again today to talk about books, great books, and potential censorship and potential banning, etc. And so we hope you have come to listen and also come with your questions as well. Thank you.
We realized immediately after last Sunday that there is more material here than we can ever possibly do justice to. So we're going to change it up a little bit today. I will begin by one of the things we're not going to get to is power. That is, which power structures are responsible for censorship? Who has a vested interest in removing certain books from the public eye or the school eye or the library? This is a really nice little Substack by a woman named Liz Lenz. She's an Iowa writer, and she talks about her own upbringing in a very conservative religious household where there was a great deal of patriarchy and a great deal of censorship. So this is one answer to the question of where does the power lie? And we're not going to get to this. So I invite you to read it on your own when you have or maybe we'll get to, I don't know what we'll do. I mean, it may come up, but, and the other thing we're going to do a little differently than last time is we're going to talk about specific books. They are all sitting up here. They have sticky notes and particularly poignant or salient pages, and we invite you at the end to come up and look at them. There's also, last week's handouts are at the back table. There are stickers here, courtesy of Jane Schuyler, that you may take if you wish, like put this on the back of your laptop or something. And then our methodology today is we're going to present some books and then we're going to invite you to discuss them. So I hope you're sitting near people who you can mix up with, and try not to just discuss it with people you already know. Circulate around, talk to people.
Okay, we're going to dive right in with a seemingly innocuous little book with a very large topic. I'm going to read this to you. It is called The 10th Good Thing About Barney by Judith Viorst. My cat Barney died last Friday. I was very sad. I cried and I didn't watch television. I cried and I didn't eat my chicken or even the chocolate pudding. I went to bed and I cried. My mother sat down on my bed and she gave me a hug. She said we could have a funeral for Barney in the morning. She said I should think of 10 good things about Barney so I could tell them at the funeral. I thought and I thought and I thought of good things about Barney. I thought of 9 good things and then I fell asleep. In the morning, my mother wrapped Barney in a yellow scarf. My father buried Barney in the ground by a tree in the yard. Annie, my friend from next door, came over with flowers, and I told good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean, also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. Those are all good things, said my mother, but I count just 9. I said I would try to think of another one later. At the end of the funeral, we sang a song for Barney. We couldn't remember any cat songs, so we sang one about pussy willows. Even my dad knew the words. Then Annie and I went into the kitchen with Mother. She gave us orangeade and butter cookies, and she left the box on the table so we could have seconds. I gave my seconds to Annie. I miss Barney, I said. Annie said Barney was in heaven with lots of cats and angels, drinking cream and eating cans of tuna. I said Barney was in the ground. Heaven, said Annie, heaven. So there, the ground, I told her, the ground. You don't know anything. My father came in from the yard and took a cookie. Big mouth Annie said heaven again. I said ground. Tell her who's right, I asked Father. She doesn't know anything. Maybe Barney's in heaven, my father began. Aha, said Annie and stuck her tongue out at me. And maybe, my father said, Barney isn't. "What did I tell you?" I said, and I yanked Annie's braid. Father made me let go. "We don't know too much about heaven," he told Annie. "We can't be absolutely sure it's there." "But if it is there," said Annie in her absolutely sure voice, "it's bound to have room for Barney and tuna and cream." She finished another cookie and went back home. My father told us he had work to do in the garden. I said that I would help, but only a little. I told him I didn't like it that Barney was dead. He said, "Why should I like it?" He said, "It's sad." He told me that it might not feel so bad tomorrow. My father had a packet of little brown seeds. He shook them out in his hand. "The ground will give them food and a place to live," he said, "and soon they'll grow a stem and some leaves and flowers." I squeezed the packet open and looked down to the bottom. I told him, "I don't see any leaves. I don't see any flowers." "Things change in the ground," said my father. "In the ground, everything changes." "Will Barney change too?" I asked him. "Oh, yes," said my father. "He'll change until he's part of the ground in the garden." And then I asked, "Will he help to make flowers and leaves?" "He will," said my father. "He'll help grow the flowers, and he'll help grow the tree and some grass." "You know," he said, "that's a pretty nice job for a cat." My father and I planted all the seeds in the garden. My mother made sandwiches, and we ate them under the tree. After lunch, we worked in the garden some more. And I still didn't want to watch any television. When I turned out my light, my mother sat down on my bed. She gave me a hug and said I had something, and I said I had something to tell her. "Listen," I said, "I told the good things about Barney." "Barney was brave," I said, "and smart and funny and clean, also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet," I said, "to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm." "Those are all good things," said my mother, "but I still just count 9. "Yes," I said, "but now I have another. Barney is in the ground and he's helping grow flowers. You know," I said, "that's a pretty nice job for a cat." Now, one of the times I read this to my class at Hope, I heard a voice from the back of the room, "How could you?" And she was weeping. And she said, "That's so sad." And just so you know, these are all of our pets who have died. Now, what I'd like you to do is talk to the people around you. Think about this book. Should it be read to individuals, to a large group like this? How should we handle this topic? Take a couple minutes and talk to each other. No, the topic is hot. Death. Yeah. No. Excuse me 1 second. This book, folks, this book is not on a banned book list. The subject is.
You're going to have trouble getting them back together.
Well, we'll just stop them.
Yeah.
We'll give them a couple minutes.
What exactly is banned?
The people are uncomfortable with the topic of death for young children.
Okay, so it's like, how young are we talking?
That's what we have to decide now.
Okay.
This is meant for very young kids.
Like preschoolers,
Yeah, it could be preschoolers, early elementary.
early elementary
Yeah.
also?
And some people think it's not appropriate at all.
Okay. Okay. How long has that book been out?
I believe since let's read the copyright and then we won't have to guess.
Yep.
1971.
Wow, it's an old book.
Yep. It's been around for 50 years.
I can't imagine college crying.
Oh, even the football players.
Really? Football players cry about
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, it's a sad story.
Well, it is, but it's hopeful too.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get into that. Okay, could we call you back together, please? Excuse me, everyone. Let's hear some of your reactions to this topic. Does anyone have any particular reactions to this book? Anybody want to make a comment about the topic in this book, death? Yes. Oh, I thought I saw a hand go up. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say death is part of life.
Here we go. Here's the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Microphone speaking. Judy is second. You're first.
I would say death is part of life. And the sooner you talk about it as a kind of a normal process, you can wipe away some of that fear and anxiety. And it's not a taboo subject, I don't think, in a home.
It is for some people.
It is for some people, I
Yeah.
understand that, yeah.
And then when it's in a picture book that is seemingly innocuous,
Yeah.
it makes it a little different.
Years ago, I taught a course in bibliotherapy for graduate students, and that topic was part of it.
Yep.
Because we know that books have the power to heal. We've known that for decades and centuries, actually. And so I would use the book with individual children in terms of the power of a book to heal, because certainly this book has a healing property, I think.
Yep.
You might use it with a group if you have somebody who is struggling, and if you read it to a group, the other children might, in fact, feel a sense of compassion for the person who is struggling.
Yep.
And it could be helpful in that way, too.
Indeed. Over here.
I was just going to add, Joyce, to say that having grown up on the farm, you have a very different take on the circle of life and death.
Yep.
And that it's, you were asking, when would you have this, to children? When would you read this book? And I would say as early as you want to. So that if they're ready, if they're dealing with some sort of death, this would be a very helpful book to cross that bridge, And I just think it's, as you were saying earlier, very healthy to deal with death because it's here, as early as we're
And
born. There we go.
We have often given this book to adult friends who've lost a pet, and it's moving. So, any other comments or reactions?
When I was a preschool teacher, we looked for books like that to help children because they were experiencing not just a pet, but family members, and I think it would be very healing.
We agree. Oh, one more.
So when I was an undergrad, I volunteered at Starlight Ministries, and they provide support groups for people and children who have experienced loss, specifically like death of parents, death of other family members. And every week we would read a book about death because books are so healing and they can help give these kids a perspective on things that they might not have gotten otherwise. So I think they're really important.
Yep.
I would say that in the church that I grew up in, the congregants would scoff and sneer the idea of animals in heaven.
Okay. Let's jump to another topic. We're going to talk about war and children's books. So, and these books will be up here for you to look at afterwards. They're picture books, so I can't pass them around, obviously. Hiroshima no Pika, we've already mentioned last week, and this is about the bombing of Hiroshima. And the illustrations are done by a Japanese artist. I don't know what you can see of this, But this is a mass of people trying to climb to the river in Hiroshima to get away from the heat. And as you can see, all of their clothes have been burned off, and in many cases, their skin has been burned off. But up in the corner is a rainbow. That's one topic. Nuclear war, this one's been around since the Cold War. This is called When the Wind Blows. It's British, and it is I guess we could call it a comic book. And it's about people in Britain who are listening to the warnings of the British government and doing exactly what they're told when the Soviets attack them with a nuclear bomb, and everything goes haywire, of course. And this is from 1982. So you see the full color pictures here? And then after the bomb drops, things are very stark and gloomy, of course. Then we're going to dive into the Holocaust. Picture books for kids on the Holocaust. This is Erica's story, and this is a story of a woman who was thrown out of a train when the Nazis were hauling her. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a baby being chucked out the window. And the baby lands on the side of the road, and a couple riding by on their bikes takes her in and raises her, and that is Erica. And she doesn't know her actual birth date, she doesn't know her birth name, but her mother sacrificed a lot by, sounds terrible, throwing her out the window to safety. And so a picture book on the Holocaust. Another picture book on the Holocaust, this one's very famous, Rose Blanche. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term Rose Blanche. It's the resistance against the Germans, the Nazis. But in this book, Rose Blanche is a girl who shows up at the concentration camps. She's right here. You can see this when you come look at it. She chucks treats and stuff over to the inmates, and this is how stark it gets. They actually have the wires, and so the Holocaust for kids, picture book. Rose dies. She gets shot by a Nazi guard. Another Holocaust book is available in the church library, and this is by Milton Newsma, and this is a story of the Holocaust for young adults. This is a narrative. So these will be available for you to look at. There are many more books on war for young adults and kids. It's a heavy topic. Now, comments on those? Do you want to say anything about the topic of war? Should it be avoided? Should we dive into it head first? What age levels?
I would think that you would want them to make sure they have some history information first. In what grade do they start teaching world history? I mean, before that, just to show them these pictures doesn't seem like they would put that in balance.
So what you're suggesting is that these books be used within a context.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. And I believe regular history classes start in middle school, don't they?
I don't know.
Yeah. Things that we retired in 2011, so.
Yeah.
Other comments about the subject of war? Yes.
For those people brought up in Christian churches, we read the Bible a lot in Christian school, and there were lots of wars and lots of violence. And maybe some of these books would put that into perspective.
And what would you say to young kids and adolescents now with the war in Gaza? I mean, it's on the news daily. Do you just avoid it? It certainly is a heavy topic. Yes, Judy.
Dawn.
Oh, Dawn. Oh, sorry.
I'm having visceral reactions as you raise some of these things. So for me, the the 10th best thing about Barney was appropriate, I thought, because in the realm in which a child dwells, the death of a pet, the death of a bird, whatever it might be, is their lived experience. And so to give language and images and paths to help them deal with those images that they're encountering makes sense to me. To thrust some of these things onto children is abhorrent to me. Now, when you talk about in middle school, so now we're now I'm giving you the broad picture of what happened during the Holocaust. And now let's make it more accessible for you. That I can understand. But any of those for young children, it would just be appalled if
Well,
that were used.
I would agree with you in the sense that to just pull this book off the shelf and start reading it to a class with no context is probably inappropriate.
But I don't want the Holocaust for a third grader, ever.
Yeah.
Middle school.
It's an issue.
Yeah.
Can I take my
Yeah,
my
go
turn?
ahead.
When I mentioned bibliotherapy, I think many of the books that have been banned probably fall into that category. And I'm thinking way back, ancient history, over the entrance to the library at Thebes was the comment, "The power of books to heal." And then I also remember Winnie the Pooh, who eats too much honey when he's at Rabbit's house. When it's time to leave, he can't get through the hole because he gained too much weight. And so he's stuck. And he says, "Will you read a sustaining book such as would comfort a wedged bear in great tightness?" I love that quote. Would you read a sustaining book such as would comfort a wedged bear in great tightness?
Okay. Was there one more? Yes.
So I'm thinking about the refugees who are coming to this country. We have a fair number of Afghan refugees who are coming to this particular area. Those children have been in it, and they are now in our school systems. And I think so many children, even young children, have access to screen time, and they are seeing images. And I would hope that teachers are listening and that parents are listening, and when children start to talk about things like this, that they move quickly to these books to try to give the child some sense of this is what's going on. Sometimes having a way to talk about a child with a book, I think, can be incredibly healing, rather than I'm just seeing these images and I'm just talking to this classmate. So that would be.
And I would like to just throw one thing out to you. You said something like, and if I misquote you, I apologize, it would be too much for a third grader, right? However, we are seeing people proclaiming themselves as Nazis in the world we live in. When is it early enough to begin to talk about what the nature of organized political evil looks like, when in fact we are seeing its resurgence? I don't have an answer to that, but one of the things Indiana Jones, right? He hated the Nazis. When did it become okay not to hate the Nazis? And I don't know the answer to that either, but I know that it's true. Jane just told us before the class, but do you have a mic on?
Yep. Yeah, I just told them before class. Some of you know my daughter teaches high school in Howell, Michigan. And last evening at the Howell-Fowlerville Community Theater, they were at the American Legion, they were using the American Legion building, and they were presenting the Diary of Anne Frank. And across the street, a large group of people with Nazi flags, flying their Nazi flags and shouting. The police eventually showed up to make sure that the scene didn't become violent, but cars were driving by, families with children, and your child must ask, what is going on? What are those flags? What does this mean? And yeah, they're going to need proper history. And I think they're going to need books like this to help explain in the days to come what is going on.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing, which is something we said last week too. I think anytime you deal with a challenged book or a challenging book, whatever the topic, it is ideal to have it presented in the context of a classroom which is safe.
Or a home.
Or a home, a classroom or a home. Many of these things deal with horrific things, but books do engage the imagination. And, you know, I'm not embarrassed to say how many times I've wept over a book, right, in my whole course of reading history. Why? Because you identify and you engage, and yet even when you're weeping over some terrible thing, you're sitting in the comfort of your house, or you're sitting in a classroom, or you have a class to discuss it with. So supportive context has a great deal to do with engaging students with any of these difficult books.
And you can't possibly know which book you do will sometimes trigger a student. I vividly remember when I was still teaching at Hope, one of my colleagues was doing a children's book about a pirate, and he dressed up in a pirate and everything. He had this sword and he had a gun, and the class was walking in, and he was dressed up like this, and this girl bolted out of his classroom, and she flew into my office and grabbed me and was weeping and just sobbing. And it took a long time to figure out what was going on, but her sister had been murdered in a fast food restaurant robbery, and here was this prof with a gun, a fake gun, obviously, and it just triggered her. And so, will that happen with some kids? Absolutely, and you have to be ready to handle that as well. Yes?
Well, on the subject of war and some of these difficult readings, I'm remembering in my second and third grade, we would every day dive under the desk to avoid
we did that.
the atom bombs. But I also can remember a teacher who was putting that into context of safety and not of fear.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the teacher plays a huge role here to put that into a context.
Yep.
We never had any books about the Holocaust, never had any of that, but I think it's important to have the exposure, but have it be put into a context that makes it understandable.
Okay, one more comment, and then we're going to move on to sexuality.
My question about all the books is, are they banned from the school or from the library? Because if they're in the library, kids have access to them without the context. So how do you ensure that the context is there unless the books are simply used by the teachers?
That's a question that we could discuss for an hour. Yes, one last one.
Can I share something about Kinderlager since you held it up? I wrote it in 1998. It was published in 1998. It was my first book, my introduction to the publishing business. It wasn't really banned, but it did get some blowback from schools, elementary schools. I didn't write the book for children, even young adults, but it was marketed as a children's book originally.
Wow.
For ages 10 and up. It finally found its niche as a young adult book. But age 10, no, too young for that.
Yep.
So it was a question of age appropriateness. And I suspect the same question would apply to any number of books on the Holocaust.
Especially these as well. Okay, we're going to, as I said, jump into sexuality and sex. Here's a book called Where Did I Come From? And this is a illustrated picture book. I will show you, I'm going to read you one little passage, briefly, very quickly, if I can get to it. Now you know that they're talking about where babies come from, you know, mama found one in the attic and all this kind of stuff. None of you know that is true. The truth is much more interesting than that, so we'll start at the very beginning. Little people are made by bigger people. And here's a picture, quite graphic, of a man and a woman in the bathtub. You can look through this after the session here, it'll be up here. Here's one for puberty. It's perfectly normal, changing bodies, growing up, sex and sexual health. And again, no holes barred. Here are men and women at different stages of physical development. The British often take a comic view of such things, and there is an author named Babette Cole, and I'm just going to mention the title, Mummy Laid an Egg. So it's an attempt to get at where babies come from by going that way. And this is one of the most beautifully illustrated books I've ever seen. It's called Happy Birthday, and it is literally about a birth. And here is mom before they cut the umbilical cord. So, and that's just scratching the surface. There's a lot more of this. However, now Barbara is going to take a book and jump into much older kids and talk to you about the absolutely true diary of a part-time Indian.
Okay, so this is a book by Sherman Alexie. It was initially published in 2007. What I'd like to do is to read you some passages from it. You can just listen, and then I think, again, we'll do the small group and see what you think about this in the classroom. I should say this is a National Book Award winner. This is a book that is frequently taught in high schools, but it is also one of the books that's most frequently banned. The shirt I wore last week that said I'm with the band, this one has the honor of being on that shirt. So circling back to where we began today, that's where I want to start. So it turns out that this is about a kid named Junior. He's a Native American growing up on a reservation in a loving family. His parents, however, are alcoholic and very poor. And so his parents are not always available to him, are not always doing the right things, but he loves them and they love him. He decides he wants to go to the white school down about 20 miles away, as opposed to the reservation school. And so it's really a coming-of-age story about this 14-year-old boy that touches a lot of that covers a lot of emotional territory. So this one is about his dog. He has a dog named Oscar, and Oscar is dying. But mom and dad do not have enough money to take him to the vet. No, I screamed. He's suffering, Dad said. We have to help him. You can't do it, I shouted. I wanted to punch my dad in the face. I wanted to punch him in the nose and make him bleed. I wanted to punch him in the eye and make him blind. I wanted to kick him in the balls and make him pass out. I was hot mad, volcano mad, tsunami mad. Dad just looked down at me with the saddest look in his eyes. He was crying. He looked weak. I wanted to hate him for his weakness. I wanted to hate Dad and Mom for our poverty. I wanted to blame them for my sick dog and for all the other sickness in the world. But I can't blame my parents for our poverty because my mother and father are the twin suns around which I orbit, and my world would explode without them. And then they shoot the dog. Here's another, so, again, it's about death, it's about an animal, but it's quite a different take and quite a different set of circumstances. This book gets a lot of criticism for being frank about sexuality, especially about the sexuality of a 14-year-old boy experiencing puberty. I was 14, it was my first day of high school. I was happy about that. And I was most especially excited about my first geometry class. Yep, I have to admit that isosceles triangles make me feel hormonal. Most guys, no matter what age, get excited about curves and circles, but not me. Don't get me wrong, I like girls and their curves, and I really like women and their curvier curves. I spend hours in the bathroom with a magazine that has 1,000 pictures of naked movie stars. Naked women plus right hand plus happy, happy, joy, joy. That's right, I admit that I masturbate. I'm proud of it. I'm good at it. I'm ambidextrous. If there were a professional masturbators league, I'd get drafted #1 and make millions of dollars. And maybe you're thinking, well, you really shouldn't be talking about masturbation in public. Well, tough. I'm going to talk about it because everybody does it and everybody likes it. I'll do one more, and I have to edit my own reading voice here because when Junior, the kid's name, goes to the White High School, he has some initial friction finding his place. He's the only Native American in the school. So he confronts some bullies, he confronts unintentional racism, he confronts the difficulty of having to get 20 miles to school, and sometimes his dad doesn't have gas in the car, and sometimes his dad is hungover and drunk and can't drive him, so he has walked the 20 miles to school on many occasions. But in this occasion, he hears a terribly racist joke. And it's hard for, I can't read the whole, I just can't read the whole thing. So anyway, but I will read to you what I can. I stared at Roger, he's a white kid, and tried to look tough. I read once that you can scare away a charging bear if you wave your arms and look big. But I figured I'd just look like a terrified idiot having an arm seizure. Hey, Chief, Roger said, you want to hear a joke? Sure, I said. Did you know that Indians are living proof that black people fuck buffalo? Imagine what I couldn't read. I felt like Roger had kicked me in the face. That was the most racist thing I'd ever heard in my life. Roger and his friends were laughing like crazy. I hated them, and I knew that I had to do something big. I couldn't let him get away with that shit. I just wasn't defending myself. I was defending Indians, black people, and buffalo. So I punched Roger in the face. He wasn't laughing when he landed on his ass, and he wasn't laughing when his nose bled like red fireworks. I struck some fake karate pose because I figured Roger's gang was going to attack me for bloodying their leader, but they just stared at me. They were shocked. You punched me, Roger said. His voice was thick with blood. I can't believe you punched me. So, again, here's a book that gets censored a great deal. It deals with racism. It deals with poverty. It deals with alcoholism. It deals with death and dying. The dog dies early on. His grandma dies later in the book. It has some pretty explicit writing about masturbation and some language, and also a great deal of emotion and anger. Go back into your small groups and discuss what you've just heard, and give some thought to who's old enough to hear this stuff, who's old enough to read it, who would benefit from reading it, how could you incorporate it into a curriculum?
And remember, this is not just a novel, this is Sherman Alexi's personal experience into a novel.
It's a pretty thinly veiled story of his own growing up, because he grew up on a reservation and did go to a white school. Little groups, talk amongst yourselves.
Stuff they would say to me, because they were supposed to read so I read.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
But I think sometimes, like, Forever was on the list of bands, and I remember as a young girl reading it and not understanding any of the sexual. And I laugh now as an adult thinking, oh, now I get it. Yeah. But yeah, kids are going to read the books, and they find guidance and explanations.
This is the book that doesn't sugarcoat either. Right. I mean, it's really, he feels his feelings very strongly and expresses them.
Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what partially autobiographical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, because it's his own
It's reflecting my own experience.
Sherman Alexie is Native American. I can't remember what tribe he belongs to.
It would have been like instructional. So it was like, I did look in the library for books about the male body because I had no idea what it looked like or what it did.
Teachers were trusted.
So
Doctors were trusted. Nurses were trusted.
I did find some. Luckily.
But I guess my point is, it needs to be in the classroom again. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you avoid talking about it, but my brother-in-law, you probably know Mark Kiske.
Of course I do, yeah.
Studied with Colin Richards. I don't know if you read his article on the church.
Okay, can we?
A while ago?
Can we come back together, please?
Okay.
And his frustrations, many often had parents who would question books that he had chosen for in the classroom, high school kids. They would come in and talk to him about it. He would explain why he had chosen their book, and they'd explain their fears, and he'd maybe modify it. But these days, the last years of his teaching, parents went directly to the superintendent. There was no
Okay,
conversation.
it sounds like we got a good discussion going, that's for sure, yeah.
And in that video last week where they
Now-
asked the what was in a contract place
I'd like
in
to
a school
make
in
an
South Carolina where there was
observation
all
if I
kinds of
could.
censorship demands. And the solution
Some-
was to
some-
gather
some-
groups of parents and
some of
teachers
you
together
know-
and have them read the books.
Who am I hearing?
And then make a decision. They took a whole year.
Feedback.
They had 97 challenge books. They had 97 little reading
Somebody
books.
has a microphone.
Made of volunteers, teachers, community members.
No, mine works.
Mic is on, everybody's.
Excuse me, everybody. Excuse me. It is on. Yeah. I want to make an observation. Some of you who know me know that I taught middle school for 8 years and I taught in a prison for 12 years. It's on. Sorry, it's on. There we go. Some of you who know me know that I taught middle school for 8 years and I taught in a prison for 12 years. So can adolescent and teenage boys be crude? Yep. Let's hear from you and see what you think about this. Way over there.
So I think they still have sex education in schools now, although that's been challenged. But all I can say is I wish I had those first books when I was a kid, because nobody ever told me the truth, and it would have been helpful to know.
Well, and generations react to those picture books differently than each other. I mean, I remember reading that book to my son. I think he was like 5. And he blurted out in front of my in-laws, "Hey, that looks just like Grandpa." And Grandpa had a fit. Get that book out of here. So, yes.
You have a microphone, you don't need one. You just raised your hand, you have a microphone.
Some of you know I lived in Wisconsin, and Sherman Alexie came to the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point to speak about this book. And we lived in Marshfield, about 40 minutes away. So we went to hear him because my sister-in-law taught at Whitworth College, and Sherman Alexie's wife taught at Whitworth College, which is a Presbyterian school. And I think all the Native Americans in Wisconsin were there that night, and they were cheering as he was talking and laughing, and they just loved his book. So I'm thinking high school is good.
Mm-hmm.
As a retired English teacher, I know that I would probably, both middle school and high school, I wouldn't, I don't think I could bring myself to try and use that book in the classroom as a whole. It'd be one thing to have it available, And if you had a particular student who might need something like that, I could see maybe at the college age level. But especially with the masturbation portion, that it is just so graphic that it's like, okay, trying to do that in a high school classroom environment, I'm like, oh, this would be very difficult. But I also appreciate, that it might be available to help, and particularly from, maybe the Native American view, that you have something that you want to add to that, that would be good.
It's an issue.
I think the one thing I didn't make clear is that is the only masturbation passage in the book. And it was less than half a page. And I think that often is the case, especially when if you remember the video last week, especially when people rely on external websites that are not monitored or proctored, and somebody just, opens up a book and finds a bad word or finds a bad passage, and I think the thing that's really tricky to deal with is, so how much of that do you accept? I'll tell you one thing about the Absolutely True Diary. It's a fast, engaging, and funny read. And there's a lot to be said in high school for books that children will actually read.
And one of the issues that you raised indirectly is this whole notion of selection versus censorship. When is it appropriate? Who gets to read it? Who supports them? So on and so forth. So, rather than a blanket no. And yes?
We're looking at one end of the beast, and this is a rather homogeneous group here. And I think we need to remind ourselves that this is a very diverse society, coming from many cultures, many socioeconomic levels. And I think in our culture today, in the United States, people often feel disenfranchised, that they have no control. I think the past election speaks to that to a degree. I think one of the issues is not whether a book is right or wrong or what age, but that parents often feel no power. And when Barb was here talking with us, we discussed the possibility of a group of parents who were invited to review books that might be considered for the year, rather than loading it all on one teacher. Lord, if I was in the classroom again, I would hate to make the decisions that I used to make.
Well, remember the video from Raleigh or South Carolina, where the parents spent a year reading all these books? Yeah. And that points to what you're talking about.
And I wasn't here for that one, so
Okay.
I apologize. But
yeah,
I think we have to bear in mind that many people don't come from the same perspective that we do, and we have to honor that.
Yep. We have a comment here.
Just thinking about this has made me think about the concept that Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop has coined, that books should be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. So people should be able to see themselves in the books, they should be able to see the perspectives of others, and they should be able to step into the lived experiences of other people. And I think this book does a really good job because, one, it allows Native Americans to see themselves reflected in this book, and it also allows people who may not have had experience in, like, being a Native American or in a reservation. It allows them to step into that world and experience it with Junior, and gives them perspective of, oh, this is like what people deal with. This is not something I've dealt with, but this is what other people deal with, and it gives them just really good perspective.
Well, this is an issue that's been going on for the last 40 or 50 years, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but years and years ago, there were never any Black or Hispanic kids in picture books for young children, and now there are, so they can see themselves, they can, share it with others, exactly what you're talking about. Other issues or comments?
What is sex education?
I have no idea.
Repeat the question.
I was wondering, because I'm kind of new here, what is the sex education program in Holland?
No idea. Does anyone have any idea? Yes.
I'm part of an effort to get it back into our public school that my children go to. So if anyone would like to be on the state-regulated board, and here's the group that reviews the materials, fields the questions from parents, whether that's affirmations or challenges, you're welcome to come join the effort. The curriculum that's in our community, it's old. It's really old. For some reason, there isn't a lot of publication of new material. So what's going through the curriculum in our community is about 20, 25 years old. That would be the language. That would be the pictures of Caucasians. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to find anything that's updated by science or updated just as far as imagery.
Yes, Claudia.
That's interesting. I happen to sit on a book publishing board, and the publishing company is out of Chicago, middle size. They do curriculum books primarily for, we do them for high school and community colleges and some private colleges. We have 2 health books, which we've recently published, and I don't think that the people in Michigan who maybe review textbooks for the schools have ever been able to make inroads here in Michigan. But they are, they have ones that they send to California and ones that they send to Texas and Florida. And Texas and Florida are vanilla. And California is very nicely done and explains about sexual education. They have them, we've done them for the middle school, the high school, and we are now in the process of working with an author to publish them for the elementary schools. They are greatly appreciated. So I could probably get my hands on a couple of those textbooks if you wanted to see them. I don't think anybody would be offended by them. They're factual.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but curriculum book publishers often follow the lead of states like Texas, because every 7th grader taking a history class in Texas has the exact same book. And so when they, conjure up a book to publish, it's going to be directed at that, and other states end up having to adopt it whether they want it or not, because it's what's available. They set the tone. So Texas and Florida, and you're exactly right. Well, I think we need to wrap up here. You want to talk about the MLA?
Well, now I don't have my mic on. I am not used to being mic'd. So can I switch by here?
Yeah. Can you talk about Kristen Gray's question that she had last week about covering when's the appropriate age level up and down for sex?
When is the appropriate age level up and down for sex? Was that your question, Kristen?
What would be appropriate at different?
Oh, yes, that was one of the things we didn't take the time to do. You can find enough books about sexuality that you can scale them from very young ages to very older students. We thought about doing that for this class, but we realized it would take us way too much research, and we just didn't have the time to do it. I think the appearance of babies in the family or in a kid's surroundings, extended family, I think talking about where babies come from is not inappropriate. The fact that this is such a skinny and illustrated book, this is mom and dad in bed. It's not too terrible, is it? I mean, you don't see organs. You see 2 people under a blanket. Oops,
notice all the
page.
hearts.
Yeah. At the top probably would be the most censored book in the U.S. This is Genderqueer, which we looked at for this class. Genderqueer is also a graphic novel. What I alluded to last time is that not only are some of the pictures about like for example, this, I don't know if you can see this, but this page shows a person, the author, Maya, having her first gynecological exam as a teenager. And so she is naked and is wrestling with all kinds of feelings about that. So there are the kind of line drawings that show pubic hair and breasts and other features of the human body. At the same time, toward the end of this book, and I mentioned this last time, there are footnotes. There are actual academic-style citations to material about gender and about how gender is biologically determined. So I would put this at the top, maybe. And I would also say that this is a book that, as I read it, and I read it this summer for this class, it explained things to me that I didn't know. And so I think it is for people who are curious or disturbed about not being able to understand what somebody means when they say trans or a variety of other words to describe a person's sexuality. And it's sensitive. I honestly could say I don't think it offended me. It just made me curious. I will also say that this is a much more fun read. I don't have a quick or an easy answer to your question, Kristen, but I appreciate your asking it. Where we were going to wind up today, which we sort of have to do soon, I think, because Jane is approaching the podium. This just came out Friday. The Michigan Library Association, I will read the first paragraph here. On Thursday, new legislation to safeguard library materials from censorship and protect the right to read was introduced in the Michigan House of Representatives. The Freedom to Read Act legislation, tie-barred House with a couple bills, was introduced by Michigan State Representative Veronica Pays and Carol Glanville, both Democrats from the other side of the state. Or no, one is from Walker, actually, and referred to the Committee on Government Operations. So this is another avenue toward working on censorship and book challenges. And I think this one is, because it's called the Freedom to Read Act, I think it's in response to some of the horrific library closings that have occurred because of challenges to certain books. So it's in the legislature.
Thank you for letting us cram an entire semester of a college course into 2 hours. We enjoyed having you here. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody, feel free to come up and look.
If you have a minute, take a look.
Thank you. Indeed, thank you. And yes, in light of that, I will say, write your legislator. And that, I just want to, in light of that, I just want to name a few things. Nobody asked this question, so what do? How do we respond? Because, I will tell you, the Moms for Liberty are coming to Zeeland and Holland and all the area. And what are you going to do about it? Well, you need to do something now. You need to support your independent bookstores. You need to go to Reader's World and you need to ask them, how can I be a friend? How can I be a helper? Go to Blue Stocking, where they hold monthly banned book club. And every month they read a banned book together and talk about it. Attend a school board meeting. Don't wait for it to happen. Start now. Get to know who's on your school board. Find out when the school board meets and be there. Vote. Know who you're voting for and know what they stand for. And vote. And write your legislator. Follow, as Richard and Barbara have talked about, the American Booksellers Association and the American Library Association. They have a lot of information right on their websites. And PEN America, there's a lot of information there. Take a look at it. Get a library card to your public library. Join the Friends of the Library at Herrick Library. Know their policies. Do you know that if you want to challenge a book at Herrick Library, you have to have a library card? That's in the policy. You can't just come in from Virginia and challenge a book at Herrick Public Library. And there are certain restrictions, of course, to getting a library card. So know the policies, know your library, read banned books, please, and keep informed. The book Resumes Project has a number of banned books and information about them. That's another website. And if you own or have in your community a little free library, put a banned book in there. Yeah. So, when they start to get, questions in the community, write an op-ed. Write to the editor. Contact your legislator at that point and contact the local press. There are lots of things you can do right now to make sure that there is freedom to read. And I'll just say, I talk about my daughter a lot. Yeah, she teaches sex education in Howell, Michigan. I hear the conversation. She just last week drove a bunch of kids to Western Michigan University, and I heard about some of the conversations that took place in that bus. Those kids are talking about every anatomy part you can think of without hesitation. They just say it. Boys and girls together. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Doesn't faze them. It's very important. As you can tell, this is a passion of mine. I have been dealing with media and the right to read and the right to view for a long time. So I'm deeply passionate about it, and hope you are aware and listening to what's happening in our community, and will be happening, almost guaranteed. So let me tell you what's going to happen next week. Jeff Monroe is going to be here to talk about his latest book, Telling Stories in the Dark, Healing and Hope in Sharing Our Sadness, Grief, Trauma, and Pain. The thread that runs through Jeff's book is Frederick Buechner's idea of the stewardship of pain, which changes the basic question in response to suffering from why has this terrible thing happened to what do I do with this? So I hope you join us next week. Thank you.